Welcome back to part 2 of the dark side of the Jersey Shore. It's after midnight on the shore, the crowds are gone, the music has stopped, and the boardwalk, once bursting with life, falls into something else entirely. Something quieter, something watching. The ocean doesn't sleep here. It never has. For centuries, these waters have swallowed ships whole, dragged swimmers under, and carried secrets back to shore with the tides. Long before neon lights and roller coasters, this coastline was known for something far darker. Shipwrecks, drownings, bodies washing up in the sand. And of course, we're going to talk about the ride accidents that people didn't walk away from. And how about those fires that tore through piers like kindled to a flame? And if you listen closely, some say you can still hear them. Because the Jersey Shore isn't just a place people come to escape. It's a place some never leave. This is Death Kiss Traveler, the only podcast that dives into the history, horror, and hauntings at amusement parks. My name is Marissa, your morbidly curious host. Tonight we're stepping into the part they don't advertise. The stories whispered by lifeguards after hours. The shadows employees swear move in between rides. The voices carried in on the wind when no one else is around. From the fog-covered beaches of Bernagot Light, to the burned and rebuilt boardwalks of Seaside Heights, to the quiet, family-friendly streets of Ocean City, there are stories. And they all say the same thing. Because this coastline has seen tragedy after tragedy, again and again and again. And here's the thing about places like that, they remember. So tonight, my spooky friends, we're diving into the ghost stories of the Jersey Shore. Because whether you believe in ghosts or not, there is something about this place, something in the salt air, something in the water. And once you hear the stories, you might start to wonder, are these just legends? Or is the Jersey Shore still holding on to the souls it couldn't save? Let's get into our story. Before you get into this episode, I highly recommend that you go back and listen to part 1. I dove into the history and the accidents that have plagued the Jersey Shore for centuries. It was so fascinating to learn the history of the Jersey Shore, because this episode is diving into the darker side of things. Before the Ferris wheel, the boardwalk games, the smell of funnel cake filling the air, the Jersey Shore had a very different reputation. They used to call this stretch of coastline the graveyard of the Atlantic. I already love the beach. Now give me the graveyard of the Atlantic and say it could be haunted, and I am there. What is better than a haunted beach? The coast was beautiful, but it was also deadly. Shifting sandbars, violent, fast-moving storms, fog so thick that ships couldn't see what was right in front of them. And no real warning systems. If something went wrong out there, you were on your own. I talked about this story last week, but in brief, in 1854, the SS Powhatan was a passenger ship traveling down the coast during a brutal winter storm. And what happened next is one of the darkest maritime tragedies in New Jersey history. Last week, I reported 200 to 300 lives lost, but most sources say 311 lives were lost. Passengers, families, crew, and almost all of them died. The storm was so violent, rescuers couldn't reach them. By morning, the wreck was gone, but the bodies weren't. They began washing ashore for days, scattered along the coastline. Some buried where they landed, some never identified. And this wasn't rare, not here, not back then. Throughout the 1700s and 1800s, thousands of ships wrecked along the Jersey coastline. Fishing vessels, cargo ships, passenger liners, entire crews lost to the sea. Some storms were so deadly, locals would wake up the next morning and find the shoreline covered with wreckage, with cargo, with bodies. And here's where the story begins, because tragedies like that, it doesn't just disappear. Throughout some of the late 19th century and into the early 20th century, this area saw an average of 4 shipwrecks a week. And each one of them has a heartbreaking story, and I wish I could tell you about all of them. I feel like that would be a whole nother podcast in itself. But locals have told stories for generations. These are not new stories. There are tales of ghost ships appearing offshore in heavy fog, sailing silently, no lights, no crew visible, just there, before vanishing completely. Others claim to see figures walking along the surf at night, dressed in old clothing, wet, disoriented, like they're still trying to make it to shore. Fishermen have reported hearing voices over the water, calling out, even when no one is around. And lifeguards, years later, have said they've seen shapes in the waves. Too still to be swimmers and too far out to be real. And even if a fraction of those stories are true, then this coastline isn't just lined with sand, it's lined with spirits. And does it surprise you? It doesn't surprise me, because with that many deaths and accidents, it's no wonder there are tales of the paranormal. And we'll get into more of those stories later. Most people don't think of war when they think of the Jersey Shore. They think summer and crowds, boardwalk lights. But in 1942, this coastline was something else entirely. During World War II, the U.S. East Coast, including the Jersey Shore, became an active war zone. This period was called Operation Drumbeat, when German U-boats hunted ships shockingly close to American shores. Ships were often silhouetted by city lights. Tankers and freighters were hit within sight of land locals on beaches in places like Cape May and Atlantic City. Both reported seeing burning ships offshore at night. It was a hunting ground. During World War II, German submarines slipped silently along the East Coast. So close to shore, people could have stood on the beach and had no idea what was moving right beneath the surface. And just off Cape May, one ship never made it through the night. The British freighter SS Miraflores was traveling along the coast. Lights low, crew asleep, thinking they were safe this close to land. They weren't. Somewhere in the dark, a German U-boat, the German submarine U-432, lined up its shot. No warning, no time to react, just a sudden explosion rippling through the ship. Fire, metal tearing apart, men waking up into chaos, or never waking up at all. The ocean swallowed the Miraflores quickly, and all 34 crew members were lost. And then, nothing. No wreckage washing ashore, no confirmed location. It was like that ship had simply disappeared. For decades, the water off of Cape May held on to that secret. Fishermen worked those waters for years. Boats passed over it. People swam above it, never knowing what was resting below. Until 1992, a fishing line snagged something deep, something solid, something that shouldn't have been there. So divers went down, and what they found was a ship. Broken, silent, frozen in time. But even then, they didn't know which one, and it took years. And one small detail. A recovered brass helm, tracked, studied, identified, until finally in 2007, they had their answer. It was the Miraflores, and after more than 50 years, it had a name again, where 34 men died in seconds. And yet divers who explored wrecks like this will tell you, there's a feeling. Not fear, not exactly, something heavier. Like you're not alone. Like the ocean didn't just take the ship. It kept everything that was on it. And maybe that's why on certain nights off Cape May, fishermen have reported strange things. Lights beneath the water. Not reflections, not boats. Something deeper and moving. or sometimes not moving at all. It's just there. And maybe it's nothing. Maybe it's just the ocean doing what the ocean does. But when you know what's sitting beneath those waves, when you know how fast it all happened, you have to start to wonder if the Miraflores is just a wreck or if it's something else, a grave that never let go. And the deeper you go into the stories of the Jersey Shore, the more you realize the ocean isn't the only place where the past refuses to stay buried. Out along the Jersey Shore, before the boardwalks wake up and long after the crowds disappear, there's another world that never really stops moving. The fishing boats go out early, sometimes before sunrise, sometimes in complete darkness, just a few lights cutting through the fog. And for generations, local fishing communities have lived with a quiet truth. Not every boat comes back the way it left. Some stories are well documented. Storms that roll in too fast, mechanical failures, sudden weather shifts in the Atlantic. But others, the ones people talk about in lower voices, don't have clear endings. There are accounts along the coast, near Cape May and up through small harbor towns, where boats are found drifting without crews. Engines still warm, but no one on board. The gears are set mid-task, like someone vanished in the middle of working. No struggle, no distress calls, just absence. Fishermen are a tight community. They notice patterns. And one thing that gets repeated in different versions of the same story, the fog. It rolls in fast along this coastline. One moment, visibility is fine. The next, the horizon disappears. Sound changes, distance feels wrong. Direction becomes unreliable. And that's when, according to older crews, things start to feel off. Some say they've seen another boat out there in the mist, close enough to follow, matching their speed, just outside visibility. And when they call out to it, no response. When they try to approach it, it never gets closer. And when the fog lifts, nothing is there, just open water. Other stories are quieter, but harder to explain. Like hearing voices over the radio when no other vessel is transmitting, or seeing navigation lights where the charts say there should be nothing. And in rare cases, boats return without explanation for where they've been. No distress, no damage, no log of what happened, just a gap in time the crew can't fully account for. Of course, most of these stories have rational explanations. Weather, equipment failure, human error, miscommunication at sea. That's always the first answer. But along this stretch of coast, where shipwrecks, wartime losses, and storms stack on top of each other, people start to notice something else. And maybe that's why the stories persist. Not because the ocean is taking people in some mysterious way, but because it's always been taking them. Slowly, quietly, over time. So when a boat doesn't come back, locals don't always ask if something happened. They ask when the water decided to take it. And once you start to see the Jersey Shore as a place where things don't just disappear suddenly, but gradually, quiet, and without witness, you start to understand why so many of its stories feel unfinished. Because out here, even the silence has history. And there is something people have whispered about along the Jersey coast, something that doesn't show up in travel brochures, something older than the boardwalks, older than the rides, the stories of mermaids. Who would have thought a podcast on amusement park accidents could have a segment on mermaids? And that's why I love doing this podcast. It leads me down rabbit holes, and I have said it before. Sometimes I feel like these stories find me. Okay, so mermaids. Not really the kind you're thinking of, not the kind with shimmering tails and seashell songs. No, these stories are different. Much darker. Sailors traveling in the Atlantic in the 17 and 1800s told stories of seeing figures in the water, human shapes rising and falling with the waves, long hair drifting across the surface, faces just visible in the foam, watching. They didn't always call them mermaids. Sometimes they called them sirens. Sometimes they didn't have a name for them at all because they couldn't explain what they were seeing. And this stretch of coastline, it was the perfect place for those stories to grow. Cold water, heavy fog, storms that rolled in fast and left destruction behind. Ship after ship lost just offshore. And after stories like that, they start to change because locals didn't talk about beautiful creatures. They talked about figures standing in the water, too still to be alive, too human to be something else. Fishermen have claimed they've seen shapes just beyond the break, not swimming, just there. Others say they've heard voices carried over the ocean at night, soft, faint, like someone calling out from a distance that doesn't exist anymore. And then there are some who swear they saw her, a woman in the water, long hair slicked to her back, skin pale against the dark waves, close enough to be real. Too far out to survive. At first, they think she's drowning, but she's not moving, she's not struggling, not calling for help. She's just there, facing the shore, and then she's gone. No splash, no wave, no sign that anyone was ever there at all. And then there are those that hear their name being called, far in the distance, and then closer right up to their ship. They look, and no one's there. So maybe these aren't mermaids. Maybe there's something else entirely. Maybe something born from every shipwreck, every storm, every life the ocean refused to give back. But it's kind of fun to believe there are. If the ocean keeps its secrets, some believe the Surf City Hotel is where a few of them came ashore. Sitting on Long Beach Island, there is this place that has been around in one form or another since the 1800s, back when the storms could erase entire stretches of coastline overnight. And remember, those shipwrecks, they weren't rare, they were expected. And not far offshore is where the SS Powhatan went down. I told you we'd talk about it more. Guests at the hotel have reported hearing voices in empty hallways. Not echoes, not other rooms, voices that sound close, like someone is speaking just outside their door. But when you open it, nothing. Others say the activity kind of centers around the upper levels, especially near balconies that face the ocean, because that's where the story of Edward Jennings begins. Jennings owned the hotel during the time when the shipwrecks could mean opportunity. As dark as that sounds, local stories claim that after the Powhatan wreck, he took valuables from the dead that washed ashore. Jewelry, personal belongings, things that were never his to take. And not long after that, people say he wasn't alone anymore. There are accounts passed down over time of Jennings standing on the hotel balcony, arguing, angry, defensive, with someone no one else could see. Witnesses described him gesturing out toward the ocean like he was being confronted, accused, and whatever he was seeing, it shook him. Because from that point on, the stories around the hotel started to change. Guests began reporting figures on the beach at night, not moving like normal people. A man with one arm walking slowly along the shoreline. A group of women arm in arm, drifting through the fog. They aren't interacting or speaking, just repeating the same quiet movement along the water's edge. Some say they look like they're searching for something. Maybe something that was stolen from them? And then there are the orbs, small floating lights seen near the hotel and out on the sand, appearing suddenly, hovering, then disappearing just as fast. Skeptics will say it's moisture, dust, light reflecting off the ocean air. But the people who have seen them up close, they'll tell you they don't move like that. And they don't feel like that. Because there is a pattern to these stories, a connection that keeps pulling everything back to the same moment in time. A storm, a wreck, a shoreline covered in the dead, and a man who may have taken something he shouldn't have. Because if those stories are true, then the hauntings at Surf City Hotel aren't random. They're not just echoes, they're unfinished business. And if you're standing on that balcony late at night, looking out over the same ocean that brought them in, you might start to wonder if the voices people hear aren't just passing through, but calling out for something to be returned. And if the ocean wasn't enough to haunt this coastline, wait until you hear what people have experienced just steps away from it. On the boardwalk, on the rides, in the places built for laughter that didn't stay that way. Last week, we talked about the accidents. Now, whether you believe in spirits or just ghost stories, what people have seen, heard, and experienced here, it's hard to explain. By the time the lights shut off at Casino Pier, everything should feel still. The rides are powered down, the crowds are gone, the music fades into nothing. But the sound of the ocean below, that's not how it always feels. Employees, especially ones closing late, have described moments where the pier doesn't feel empty at all. It starts small, subtle, easy to brush off. A click. Like a restraint locking into place. The kind of sound you hear all day long, just not at 1 a.m. When no one is there, they turn, expecting to see someone, another worker, a straggler, but the platform is empty. And then there are footsteps. Not loud, not rushed, just steady. Measured, walking across the boards beneath them. The person stops. The footsteps stop. They move again, and it follows. Some workers say they refuse to look back because the one time they did, there was nothing there. Others say the feeling is what gets you. Not something you see, something you know, like being watched from somewhere just out of sight. And then there are the nights when the ocean is loud, wind pushing in from the water, the pier creaking under your feet. And that's when some say they've heard something else. A voice. Not clear, not loud, but there, carried in with the wind. At first, they think it's just the ocean, waves breaking, air moving through the structure, until it sounds too human. And maybe the strangest reports come from those who linger a little too long. They describe seeing a figure, not fully there, not solid, standing near where the ride once operated. Still, like someone is waiting, not moving toward them, not reacting, just there. And then gone. No footsteps this time, no sound, no explanation. Most people who work there don't talk about it publicly, because how do you explain something like that? So the stories stay quiet, passed between coworkers, mentioned just enough to warn the next person working the late shift that the pier doesn't always empty when it closes, because some believe places like this hold on to moments, energy, tragedy, even when the ride is gone, and all of those years have passed. Along the Jersey Shore, there's a strange pattern people don't always talk about out loud. It isn't tied to one park. It isn't tied to one town. It shows up wherever there's an old Ferris wheel standing over the ocean. At places like Playland's Castaway Cove, once the crowds leave and the boardwalk goes quiet, something changes. The Ferris wheel becomes the tallest thing for miles, a slowly moving structure frozen above the dark Atlantic. Lights still glowing faintly against the night sky, and that's when people start to notice it. They don't notice it during the day, not when the rides are full, but after closing when the wind dies down and the ocean sound takes over everything else. That's when the Ferris wheel seems to shift, just slightly. A gondola moving when it shouldn't, a soft sway that doesn't match the wind. Motion so small you almost convince yourself, did I imagine that? Almost. Workers have reported it more than once, walking past the ride after shutdown, seeing a car hang still for a moment, look away, then noticing it isn't exactly where it was. It's shifted or swaying. And then there are the nights inside the structure where maintenance crews are doing their final checks. Lights off except for emergency glow. From below, the Ferris wheel is silent, still and locked. And yet people have described hearing it. Not the motor, not metal settling, something like movement overhead, a faint shifting sound coming from the gondolas above them, as if someone's inside, even though the ride is empty and secured and shut down for the night. At Playland's Castaway Cove, these stories tend to be passed quietly between staff, not as ghost stories exactly, more like things you don't quite know how to categorize. Because Ferris wheels are built to move slowly, to creak, to respond to wind, that's expected. But this effect people describe, it doesn't just feel like wind. It feels intentional, like something is testing the structure, waiting for a reaction. And maybe that's why Ferris wheels along the shore carry such a specific reputation in folklore. They sit between two worlds, above the land, facing the ocean, exposed to wind, fog, and silence. At night, when everything else goes still, they become the highest point of awareness on the boardwalk, a place where even a small movement feels like a message, or worse, a response. And now I'm going to leave you with a story. It's the kind of night they tell you not to stay for. Late, cold, the beach almost completely empty along the Jersey shore. The last of the sun is long gone. Boardwalk lights flicker in the distance, but out here, it's just the ocean and the wind. He's one of the last lifeguards on duty, closing shift, just doing what they always do. One final scan over the water before heading in. The tide is coming in slow, waves rolling steadily, nothing unusual, until he sees it. At first, it's nothing, just a shape out past the break, too still. He narrows his eyes, steps closer to the edge of the water. There's someone out there, standing. Too far out, too deep, every instinct kicks in at once. His training takes over. "Hey!" he shouts. No response. The figure doesn't move, doesn't wave, doesn't struggle, just stands there facing the shore. Now his heart is racing because this isn't how drowning looks. This isn't panic. This is wrong. He grabs his whistle, blows hard, sharp and loud. Cutting through the wind, nothing. The figure is still there. He takes a step into the water. Cold rushes over his ankles. "Hey, I'm coming out!" Still nothing. The waves hit his knees now, then his thighs. He doesn't take his eyes off the figure, because something about it feels like if he does, it won't be there when he looks back. And then for a second, he sees it clearly. It's a woman. Long black hair slicked back. Clothing clinging to her like she's been in the water a long time. But she's not moving, not breathing, not reacting, just staring at him. He freezes, because now he's close enough to understand something that doesn't make sense. The water is too deep. There's no way she's standing, no sandbar, no support, nothing beneath her. She should be floating or sinking or fighting to stay above the surface. But she's not. She's upright, perfectly still, like the ocean is holding her there. The wind dies down for a second, everything goes quiet, except for the water, and that's when he hears it. Not from the shore, not from behind him, from her. A voice, soft, "Help me." Barely there, like it traveled a long way to reach him. Every instinct screams at him to get closer, to help, to do his job. But something deeper, something older, tells him to stop. Because she hasn't moved, not once. And then without warning, she's closer. Not swimming, not walking, just closer. Same position, same stillness, like the distance between them just collapsed. His breath catches, his heart is pounding now so loud he can hear it over the waves. "Hey," his voice cracks. And then she tilts her head, just slightly, and smiles. Wrong. Not relief, not gratitude. Something else. Something that doesn't belong on a human face. He stumbles back, water splashing hard as he retreats towards the shore. He doesn't look away. He can't, because she's still there, watching him. And then the next wave rolls in, breaks, and she's gone. Nothing, no ripple, no splash, just empty water. And he stands there, chest heaving, trying to make sense of what he just saw. But there's nothing to make sense of. No swimmer reported missing, no one else on the beach, no footprints leading into the water. Nothing, except one thing. As he turns to leave, he hears it again, behind him, out in the dark, that same voice. "Help me." Soft, patient, like it knows. Someone eventually will. And along the Jersey Shore, some lifeguards will tell you the ocean doesn't just need saving from. Sometimes it's calling you into it. I hope that story gave you a little chill. It gave me full body chills telling it to you multiple times. I think it's one of my favorite stories I've ever told you. But now, my friends, it's time to wrap it up. And this is where the Jersey Shore really shows its dual identity. One side is built on the sun, salt air, and nostalgia. And on the other, it's layered with loss that never quite stayed in the past. Because when you look at the accidents, the pier collapses, the storms, the rides that failed, the moments where a normal day suddenly feels irreversible, it's easy to file them away as history, as statistics, as something that happened then. But the stories that come afterward don't behave like history, they linger. They repeat in whispers from maintenance workers on shutdown rides, in flickers of movement where nothing should be moving, in that uneasy feeling people describe as standing near empty boardwalk attractions after midnight, when the ocean is loud enough to swallow everything except for your own thoughts. And whether you believe it's memory, imagination, or something else entirely, the shore doesn't seem to make much of a distinction. Because here, the same places that once carried laughter and crowds also carried impact, silence, and aftermath. And those layers don't really separate cleanly. They stack on top of each other. I think that's why these stories persist. Not because the shore is haunted in the traditional sense, but because it remembers in a way people can still feel. In the creak of old wood, in the sway of an empty gondola, in spaces where something used to be and somehow still feels like it is. And as long as people keep returning to the boardwalks, the piers, and the rides, they'll keep telling the same thing, just in different ways. Some places don't just hold history, they hold everything that happened inside it. Thank you for listening to Death Kiss Traveler. I loved this episode. It was completely different than something I have done before. And let me know if you liked it too. Do you want me to do more episodes like this? I went down a rabbit hole and never thought I would talk about shipwrecks and mermaids and ghosts on the ocean, but I think it's one of my favorite episodes. I know I say that about all of them, but I appreciate you listening. This podcast is growing every single day, and I can't thank you enough for the support. This podcast is written, researched, and recorded by me, Marissa. Produced by Sunkissed Traveler, the travel agency that takes the stress out of planning a vacation. Wherever you want to go, Disneyland, Universal Studios, a cruise ship, how about a trip to the Jersey Shore? No matter where you want to travel, Sunkissed Traveler can help. See show notes for details or visit sun-kissedtraveler.com. And now, my friends, I have another podcast that I think you would love. Check it out.
If you're anything like me, you're always hunting for stories that make your skin crawl in the best way. That's why I have to tell you about Grimly. Every week, they dig into the unholy, the unsolved, and the deeply unsettling. From chilling true crime to eerie tales that blur the line between fact and folklore. The production is hauntingly good, the storytelling absolutely captivating. It's the kind of podcast that stays with you long after you finish listening. So if you're ready to explore the darker side of history and humanity, subscribe to Grimly wherever you get your podcasts. Just don't say I didn't warn you.